Been watching ball with my big old brain and think the tape needs some explaining. Studying the stats to understand it. Hey, yo.
Talk data to me. Talk data to me.
Hello, what is up, y'all? Welcome to episode 15 of Talk Data to Me. I am here today with the great Matt Freedman at Matt F. the Oracle on Twitter. And man, guys, we have a really great show for you today. 10 trends, 10 sneaky trends, some might say. And let's be honest, Freedman, there's more than 10 trends. We went back and forth on these. We have bucketed them, so it is 10 trends. But we're going to talk about more than that as far as the players go. So we're going to go a little bit rapid fire here today. We'll try to keep it under 60 minutes for you. We know you guys like, you value your time and we value our time. So one question, Freedman, to start off, like always. How much weight do you give to recent trends, whether it be 6 weeks, 4 weeks? You know, when you're working through your projections, you're working through your rankings, the way you view players, you know, in the coming week, as well as the rest of the season. How does that work for you?
So I tend to put more weight towards season long trends or even longer term trends than that, unless I can kind of like identify, oh, here's the clear thing that has changed. And if I can identify that, then I go almost all the way to like the new trend with just a little bit of weight on the old thing. But it has to be like a clear line of demarcation where I can see a reason for why something has changed.
Yeah, so I love the way you put that because I 100% agree. Because a lot of times on social media, you know, I get all these, you know, questions or comments, or we get into conversations and people talk about the last 2 games of this or that. And I'm like, that's probably variance. Like, you know, players are going to have ups and downs through the season for the most part. Now, when you do see a clear trend, you know, and you understand, maybe there's coach speak that goes along with it. Maybe it's a young player that you know, is in a period of their career where they could be ascending and you need to react quickly. Maybe a teammate got hurt, right? Those are all clear things, right? That then help you start to form or shape a different potential, you know, opinion of a player and maybe the way that you would project them. So yeah, really good stuff. So on that note, hey, number one, we're going to talk about the Rams and 49ers. We do some player trends first, guys, but specifically with the Rams and 49ers. We have 2 running backs potentially getting lighter workloads, Freedman. So number one, Kyren Williams. If you look at him in his first 6 games, we're scoring 16.9 fantasy points per game. Here's the big thing, though. Over the last 4 games, still looks good, 16.2. But if you look at the snaps, Freedman, they have gone from 77 to 64%. Attempts have fallen from 70% to 56%. Attempts inside the 5 have fallen from 71 to 55%. So when you look at this, do you see this as being something where it's potentially a clear change? You know, they are wanting to lighten the workload on Kyren Williams. They've got a young and up-and-coming player in Blake Corum, even though they paid Kyren, he got his bag, and maybe they want to use more of a split backfield, or you look at this as something as probably going to stick to the longer trends here from the last 3 years.
No, this certainly matters because I think one of the things to take into account is, hey, what does a team do after its bye? Because that's like the one time in the year where they have really to self-evaluate versus just, oh, we have to prepare for the upcoming opponent. And so especially like if you think, okay, what has this team done after its bye? And then if you have a young ascending player, as you mentioned, and Blake Corum, who can help lighten the load, all of that makes sense. And this makes me think of sort of like financial data to where it's like the market looks the same, but all the underlying data is like putting up red flags. That's what this looks like to me. There are several red flags here with Kyren Williams.
And what's interesting is the Vegas odds makers have already adjusted on this. Kyren's rushing props have come down, guys, over the last 2 to 3 games. I am a sick person, and I look at them every week, mainly to compare how our projection model's doing, like at a baseline, because that helps me evaluate its performance. But these numbers are coming down. So with Kyren Williams, I'll just say this. His utilization score over the first 6 games, 85. Last 4 games, 73. His utilization score comps for that first 6 games, 16.4 points, right there with the 16.9 he was scoring. Right now, if this continues, he's due for a regression. He's averaging 16.2 fantasy points per game. His average utilization score comp averaged 14.1. Remember, guys, utilization score 0 to 100 scale, looks at the player's role, also looks at what they're doing with their role by including fantasy points. So it knows that Kyren plays in a badass offense with the Rams. That's already calculated in here based on the fantasy points he's scoring. So just a note to self. And I think the other big takeaway here, Freedman, Blake Corum, we don't have to spend any more time on this one, but he moves into elite handcuff territory, guys. Like he's now moved out of that murky, would it be him and Jarquez Hunter or whatever? And I'm sure Hunter would get a little bit, but he's going to take over most of Kyron Williams' role if he has to miss any times, because as like Ian says, he wins the lotto and decides to take one weekend off. All right. This one's a little more, I don't want to say it's controversial, but CMC, man. And this is a shorter trend. This is just over the last 2 games, but it does appear like they might want to lighten his workload. I mean, he is an older player, and they have been absolutely loading this man up this year, Freedman. But over the last 2 games, we've seen his attempts drop from 74% over the first 9 to 58% in the last 2 games. Attempts inside the 5 have fallen from 88% to 67%. And the recipient of those opportunities has been Brian Robinson Jr., who they traded for. Kyle Shanahan's been on the record saying he is their clear he's their clear running back 2. His attempts have jumped from 18% over the first 9 games to 37%, and carries inside the 5, 0 to 33%. So want your thoughts on this one, Freedman. Like here's the thing with CMC, guys. His utilization score was a 98 before. It's a 92 over the last 2 games. They're both still elite. You're going to love having Christian McCaffrey in fantasy. But do you have any concern at all over this, Freedman, or is it just, hey, just make sure you roster Brian Robinson Jr.?
Yeah, I think it's more of like hey, we thought we knew Brian Robinson was really important, and now this has been confirmed. What is still good about Christian McCaffrey is his route usage is pretty much intact, and so that's really good. And then the 67% of the usage inside the 5, there might be a little bit of variance there.
It's a small sample.
It's a small sample. The past game was a blowout for the 49ers, and so that maybe impacted this a little bit. I still think if it's a close game, Christian McCaffrey is probably out there and getting more than the workload that we've seen at the past 2 games. But I do agree with the idea of they probably want to scale him back a little bit when they can't afford to do that.
Yeah, and if we just look at the short yardage snaps on it, guys, which can be a better indicator, because so short down and distance is essentially similar to goal line, or inside the 5 situations where you have to get the first down, and a lot of times teams like to run the ball in those scenarios. So McCaffrey weeks 10, 11, or the last 2 games, weeks 10 and 11 in that category, and this often correlates very strongly to the carries inside the 5. 78% of the work still. So I am with Freedman. There could be a little bit of variance going on, but it also makes sense that down inside the 5, you let the bigger back come in occasionally, and try to score a touchdown. So that can happen. All right. So with CMC, you could see it impact him a little bit. Maybe this is enough to make JT the clear-cut running back 1 and CMC number 2, but I'm also with Freedman. The routes are still so good at 79%. That's absolutely insane, guys. That's still above every other running back that's out there. 23% target share as well. All right. So let's talk about some rookies that are trending up. And these were really going to be this I thought was pretty sneaky as of yesterday, Freedman. When I wrote the show sheet, sent the ideas over to you, and got your stamp of approval and your feedback on these guys. And we have Jaden Higgins here, the Texans round 2 draft pick. And before yesterday is like, he's, like 43% of the routes, 53%, 57%, but hadn't really scored a lot of fantasy points yet, guys. Over that period, he had 8.3 fantasy points per game. Well, now we've got to adjust our sample to the last 3 games, which includes last night with Jaden Higgins, where he had a season high 68% route participation. So playing time, absolutely on the rise for Jaden Higgins. Man, these targets per route run numbers also appears to be picking up the offense and gaining the confidence of the quarterback. 27%, 26%, 43%. Why do you use targets per route run? Because he's in a part-time role. It's just to give you guys an idea, because the target shares by themselves are not going to sound like fantastic, but he's only playing half the snaps right now, even though it's, last night, almost 2/3 of the snaps. So what are your thoughts here, Freedman, with one thing that I like to look at? Number one, I like to look at the rookie supermodel, and this is a player that 34% of his comparisons became a top 36 wide receiver by year 3. So he wasn't like a slam dunk prospect in the rookie supermodel, but he was a guy that basically, if he started to show flashes, you could say might show something. And then the other thing here that's really interesting, since 2015, so the last 10 years, 27% increase in points per game for wide receivers taken in round 2 of the NFL draft. A little bit lower for wide receiver 3s. Wide receiver 4s are also good. We also know wide receiver 2, the wide receivers in round 2 a lot of times are like the guys that might have been round 1 guys that slipped out, or they're guys that teams have identified that they're like, that's the guy I want to add to my team. And the Texans did that early in round 2 with Jaden Higgins.
Yeah, just following up on the idea, someone like Devontae Adams, like Allen Robinson back in the day, like round 2, like Bill Barnwell did this study on sort of like the drop off in quality, and this was like 10 years ago, so I mean, new data, but yeah, round 2 was always sort of like, hey, this guy could have gone in round 1. Like you always find value in the second round of NFL drafts, and maybe that is Jaden Higgins. 9 targets is what he had last night to lead the Texans, so absolutely right, he is ascending. I still have some hesitation about the overall quality of the pass offense, which I think could hamper Higgins. But for dynasty, if we're kind of thinking long term, Higgins is someone that I would be interested in trying to acquire before that offense really picks up and people will kind of get wise to maybe the long term potential.
Yeah, and the thing I'll say, I think you brought up, I think really good point there on the quality of offense with Houston. There are people actually saying that Davis Mills should remain the starter. He's played well, but I'm still not in that camp. Like it's CJ Stroud. And I get it. You also want to see him do this with CJ Stroud, but I'll just tell you guys this, and this is all you need to know. Like if Jaden Higgins is going to break out, he's probably breaking out either way with Davis Mills, or with CJ Stroud. They're both competent enough to support 2 pass catchers in an offense. Are they competent enough to make 2 pass catchers blow up? Probably not. And we know Nico's the guy. He's got the bag. He's got the targets. He's got the resume. But it's hard to find perfect scenarios. And so even though we may not love the Texans offense, who knows, maybe Jaden Higgins is part of what's been missing, because their run game stinks. And there's not really a reason to run it a lot because their offensive line is so terrible. That also hurts the quarterbacks. But at the same time, it's not a very strong wide receiver room behind Nico Collins. I mean, they've been relying on Dalton Schultz really as their second target all year. Guys, I'll tell you this, Jaden Higgins could have had a huge night last night. Like we had an overthrow. Potentially Jaden Higgins ran that route wide when the DB fell. Freedman, I don't know if you saw it. Or Davis Mills led him too much. He also had 2 weird plays where they would have been tough to get his feet in, but his lower body control seemed really weird, like having a leg way up in the air after the pass got to him. So that negated a pass. And then he also had a pass hit him in the back or hit the defender in the back whenever he had beaten the defender down the field. I mean, guys, he scored a touchdown last night. He could have scored 2 touchdowns and had over 100 yards. So if you want a chance to get him, now's probably one of your last chances that he's still available in your leagues. He's going to be a hot waiver wire commodity. All right, moving on, Freedman. Luther Burden, the third. Got to get the third in there. Another round 2 pick. So everything we just said around round 2 picks, last 10 years of data. We don't have a big sample here, okay? We have 1 game. And in this last game, he took the wide receiver 3 role from Olamide Zaccheaus. He was out there for 61% of the dropbacks. That is number 1 on the season for him. The other thing is he has a 22% targets per route run on the season. That's actually higher than what we have with Higgins. Now, he does get more of these screens and kind of gimmicky looks as well, where they just try to manufacture touches around the line of scrimmage, which influences that. But, man, he's got a 2.02 yards per route run. And, guys, yards per route run isn't like everything, but it's a nice way to evaluate talent, like overall for a wide receiver. If I had to pick like one periphery stat besides fantasy points, or using a more holistic stat like the utilization score, yards per route run is one that I often look to. And so when you get to a 2, like you're in a territory where you've got my attention. And so we've got that going on. He was also a higher graded prospect than what we had with Jaden Higgins, who we just talked about. So any thoughts here on Luther Burden and any potential to ascend further than what we've seen so far, Freedman?
Yeah, I mean, I liked him as a prospect. He was really intriguing in college. I liked that in college he had the ability to do things like as a runner too, like in multiple phases of the game. But it's similar to the Texans where that Bears offense, it's better, but because of how they deploy their weapons, I think it is harder for any one guy to dominate. And so I'm just a little bit hesitant of thinking that Burden in the final, let's say third of the season, especially in a team that plays outdoors and is still kind of leaning on the run a little bit more than I would want for a receiver to ascend from someone who's like the number 3 wide receiver to someone who's actually like fantasy trustworthy. Like even if he ends up being productive, that doesn't mean you're actually going to want to put him in your lineup, because any given week he could fall off. And that's like a week that actually matters at the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. I will say this though, DJ Moore's playing like absolute crap. Hasn't looked good all year. Here's the thing though, guys, 2 more years on this contract, $35 million in dead. And there's more years than that, but the team has an ability to get out of it after 2 more years. $35 million in dead cap though in 2026 if they wanted to get away from DJ Moore. So that sounds pretty difficult.
He's probably on the team.
Probably on the team. Alameda Zacchaeus, he's probably past him. Like, this is a journeyman. Like, he's a solid player, actually. People kind of dump on these guys that manage to hang around the NFL. They hang around for a reason, guys. They latch on to these other teams because, they're decent players. We're going to talk more about this Bears rotation in a minute. Here's the one area, though, where I differ. I think not differ than Freedman, but a different spin I would put on it is number one, we want to invest in good players that have growing roles, because we really don't know what the ceiling is. Like, they could just decide. I mean, it is Ben Johnson. He wasn't the guy that was on the team whenever DJ Moore he wasn't the head coach when DJ Moore got signed to that contract. He was part of this organization when Luther Burden was taken in round 2, when he knew he already had DJ Moore on this team with Romeo Dunze, so maybe he just used him as the Khalif Raymond, but that's a really expensive pick, Freedman, to spend on Khalif Raymond, if you think back to his time with the Lions. So I'll just say that. And then, guys, the other thing here is we never know. Like, we don't want injuries to happen, but they happen. If DJ Moore were to go down, Luther Burden, it would be insane. Like, so if you have a roster spot right now, all I'm saying is if you've got an open spot with somebody that you don't really think needs to be there, this is the kind of player to stash away. Freeman's right. You're not putting him in your starting lineup this week unless you're in a really deep league that starts a lot of players. And if that's the case, probably not available anyway. So, yeah, nice stash play. All right, last rookie we're going to talk about here, Bhayshul Tuten, Freedman. First 6 games, snaps were at 18%. The last 4 games have jumped to 27%. Attempts, first 6 games, 20%. Last 4 have jumped to 27%. Route participation is up from 13 to 22%. I will also say these numbers would probably be higher if he didn't leave the game with an ankle injury last week, because he was on pace to set season highs. Before the ankle injury, which happened on the 7th drive in week 11, he had 41% of the snaps, 44% of the rushing attempts, and a 19% route participation. So moving more, that would have been more like a 1A, 1B scenario versus ETN in the 1 and him in the 2. Thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree on this. And the good news is that even though he exited last week with that ankle injury, he opened this week with limited practice. So that's trending towards him playing this week, which is
and ETN's really on the report.
ETN, exactly. ETN is on the report with the shoulder injury. So they have the exact same status. Both of them have practiced limitedly Wednesday, Thursday. Check the practice report. But you could have had a situation where we had this great trend for Tuten and then it got cut off because of the injury. But I think he's going to play this week, and maybe because of ETN's injury, we just see that trend continue. So yes, Bhayshul Tuten is a guy that we would absolutely want exposure to. And if this continues, or one way or another, maybe he overtakes ETN, or like clearly eats into the role, or ETN suffers an injury, Bhayshul Tuten is absolutely someone I would want on my bench right now.
A lot of paths to victory here for Tuten. And honestly, up until now, I've felt like, and I've always liked Tuten, had Matt Waldman on early in the season. He talked about how much he liked Bhayshul Tuten. The rookie supermodel liked him. But really up until, these last several weeks, I mean, he was in much more of a reserve role than honestly the fantasy community wanted to paint him as. I mean, we were basically, it was a hopium thing where basically you're clinging to historical trends, so I talked about wide receivers that went in round 2, running backs that have gone on day 2. So round 2 and round 3, they've on average increased their fantasy points per game by 25% over the second half of the season. A lot of reasons for that, guys. Teams want to get a look at a young player. Maybe they're a losing team. Starter could go down. There's a lot of different ways those things play out, but Tuten's definitely in that bucket. He was technically a day 3 pick. I'm giving him a pass here, though, Freedman, because he was the second pick in round 4. In a loaded running back class. I mean, so most other drafts, like Bhayshul Tuten probably is a round 3 pick, because the teams that wanted running backs, one of them are probably taking him. there. The other thing I want to know here, final year of Travis Etienne's deal. So this is a little different than the Corum one, because I do believe, and Travis Etienne has played well this year, guys. So I'm not knocking him. I think a lot of the Travis Etienne hate comes from people that drafted Bhayshul Tuten that want him to take him over and for their fantasy lineup. It's funny, like how that can shape our opinions. Who we drafted in fantasies is a real surprise. But I will say it is the last year of his deal, and I'll say versus the Corum thing. You tell me if you agree with this. If one of these two backs, Corum or Bhayshul Tuten, were to take over the running back role due to non-injury reasons, it's Tuten.
100%. It's Tuten. Kyron Williams is not being overtaken, and
he got paid.
Like they love him. Yeah, they love him too much, and now they are too invested in him. Etienne is on the way out. And I would say, even just flipping it, which one of these guys is likelier to be the starting running back for his team next year? I'd say easily Bhayshul Tuten versus Blake Corum.
Yeah, Tuten, man. He doesn't have great draft capital, so they could draft someone else in round 2 or round 1 or whatever. We never know. But look, Bhayshul Tuten, guys, right now rostered only 42% of the time in Yahoo. This is a player that you want on your bench for the rest of the way. All right. Moving on, let's talk about some Packers. We're going to talk about the Packers wide receiver rotation, Freedman. And I'm going to see what your thoughts are here. Like, the Packers wide receiver room is always such a murky situation to figure out. You even have a head coach that says, we don't need a wide receiver one. Basically, we have the system. Well, how'd the system work for Buffalo last night? Not good. I will say this. I think that the Packers have better wide receivers than the Buffalo Bills. So Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson, I think, are the two names right now that have emerged. Freedman, get your thoughts here, but just real quick on Doubs. Started with a high ankle sprain in the preseason. So if you look at his first 2 games from a utilization standpoint, was not in a full-time role. Then he got over that. So from weeks 3 to week 9 before he picked up a chest injury that basically caused him to be limited in the last 2 games. He was averaging 13.6 fantasy points per game, a career high 24% target share. So a guy that honestly, historically, I've just kind of been like, okay. Like, I guess I'll roster Romeo Doubs, but I will say he's having a career year. So let's start with him. Any thoughts here on Doubs? And obviously the rest of the context here, guys. Tucker Kraft's gone. We could get Jaden Reed back. Matthew Golden, honestly, hasn't looked bad on film, but underperforming in the box score.
Yeah, Romeo Doubs, out of the guys we're going to talk about in this Packers wide receiver rotation, the least intriguing of all of them, which is sad to say because he's like the one who's like theoretically the most consistent. Like, he's always out there.
Even for this year?
Yeah.
Versus Dynasty, he's the least interesting to you? Okay.
Yeah. That's all I have to say. The least interesting.
Ian's going to be so mad at you if he listens to this show. Okay, he's
like
what about Christian Watson?
Drummer. He's like the drummer in the band where it's like, okay, he's fine. There have been like lineup changes all over the place. That drummer's been like the one consistent guy, but it's like, he's the drummer.
Yeah. I will say this, guys pop up to have these career years that have been like, because look, Romeo Doubs is good enough to be on an NFL field.
Yes.
He's really been a wide receiver 4 profile based on the data and the metrics that I look at. But we do have players like that can have a year where they ascend into a wide receiver 3 or 2 territory. Everybody gets excited, thinks the breakout has happened, and then they just kind of fall back and, fade back into oblivion. It happens. So he could be having one of those years. All I'm going to say is that 24% target share career high. Like, that's a good number. So we just give him props for that. His historical utilization score comps based on the games when he's been healthy, they've averaged 14.4 fantasy points per game. And that's part of why I've created the utilization scores, because sometimes, like, if you were just to show me Romeo Doubs' name, probably no matter what it had next to it, like, I was just going to say absolutely no way. So I'm not bullish on the man, but I do think he's a wide receiver 3 the rest of the way. So if you're in a deep league, like, he's a player you could use. He could surprise us with a wide receiver 2 finish, but overall, I am with Freedman. I'm still kind of in the bucket of like, okay, like, you twisted my arms, Romeo Doubs. I guess I might put you in my lineup. So let's talk about Christian Watson, and then we'll throw Matthew Golden in with this, Freedman. But ACL injury, this is pretty amazing. Coming off an ACL injury from week 18 in 2024, this dude has already been back out on the field over the last 2 games. He's got starter route participation at 82%. Over those 2 games, man, 13.6 points per game, 17% target share. So not a huge target share yet, still getting healthy, but man, getting targets down the field. Like he's the guy that they want to really uncap and unload and take the top off of the defense with. 107 air yards per game. Yeah. Any thoughts here on him and the fact that Matthew Golden, dealing with this injury, was the wide receiver 4 for the team last weekend?
Yeah, I mean, Matthew Golden still has a long-term shot, but, increasingly a little pessimistic on him for this season. Dontavian Wicks is kind of the annoying guy who's like always out there and like always flashes enough, but isn't consistent enough.
Yeah.
Christian Watson really has intrigued me. The draft capital that was invested in him, the ability that he showed kind of early in his career, like the playmaking ability. And I would say like he's really been like the number 1 wide receiver on the team since he returned in week 8, 37% air yard share, 40% end zone target share. Those are number 1 marks over that 4-game sample. And he's been productive enough with that usage. You would like to see the team throw more. You would like him to see a little more playing time, but as you mentioned, the past 2 weeks, he really has been a full-time player on the field. And then thinking about this week specifically, the Vikings are number 29 in defensive pass DVOA against number 1 wide receivers. Like we could have another big game from Christian Watson this upcoming week.
Yeah. So I think the interesting part about Watson, he's the playmaker. Right. Yeah. Doubs is like, he's got to have the target share to manufacture it. And the games where Christian Watson gets a target share or a bigger target share to go along with his explosive playmaking ability, those are eruption games. So the way I would look at Christian Watson, if I were you guys, he's essentially Jameson Williams, but no one talks about him. Right. JMO started off the year slow, was just basically used as a deep decoy. Suddenly they're like, oh, we have Jameson Williams. We should probably use him in more ways than just running him down the field. And once they did that, and especially these last 2 games with Dan Campbell calling plays, I mean, JMO just gets put into these positions where he catches the ball and no one on the field can catch him. Christian Watson has shown that same kind of stuff where he can take that short slant all the way. We're Cowboys fans, guys. We've seen both of these Packers receivers, Doubs as well as Christian Watson, burn us. Doubs did it more in the playoffs, but man, I remember that game against the Cowboys, his rookie year at the end of the year. Watson caught like a slant, took it to the house. He caught a deep crosser for a touchdown. And then it was a bomb for a touchdown. Then he caught a deep crosser in the end zone for a touchdown. Like he's got, an ability as far as his speed like this, it's God-given. And it's, a lot of people can't keep up with him. So yeah, I'll just say real quick, guys, as far as actionable takeaways here, 37% of his utilization score comparisons were wide receiver 2s. And that's not even fair. He just came back from injury. That's a positive. Just coming back from an ACL injury that, many people wouldn't even be back on the field yet from, to already have that in your range of outcomes, 43% of them were wide receiver 3s. So, if you're adding those 2 numbers together at home, you can see that roughly 80% of the time it works all the time. And that's all we have to say about that. All right. Jake Ferguson, Freedman. You alluded to this a few weeks ago. We were on another show together. I know one of your things were the low ADOT things with Jake Ferguson. That didn't bother me as bad because that's like 90% of tight ends in the NFL. We get a few that work down the field, but you did have concerns about what it would look like, once we had, CeeDee Lamb, back in this offense. And that's definitely played out. Like if we look at Jake Ferguson over the 4 games without CeeDee Lamb and just without CeeDee Lamb, we have a 24% target share. In the games with CeeDee Lamb, since CeeDee Lamb's return, that target share has dropped to 16%. End zone targets were 29%, down 20%. Air yards per game, which goes along with your targets, 31.8 down to 17. So what are your thoughts here? This is one where I definitely feel like you can pinpoint what happened. You need to recalibrate your expectations around a player.
Yeah, I really don't have anything to add to this. It's just, CeeDee Lamb is back in the offense. He's obviously much better. He should dominate targets much more than Jake Ferguson. This is an expected decline. Really nothing to add.
What are your thoughts on him the rest of the way? Utilization score still gives him, a 24, and this isn't a chance, guys. It's just his historical comparisons. 27% of his comps have finished as tight end 6 or better based on what we've seen from the last, 4 games. And then if you look at most of these guys have been low end tight end ones though, versus the high end tight end one we had with Ferguson. 32% were tight end 7 and 9, 24% tight end 10 to 12. So still a good offense.
Yeah.
Still got Dak Prescott. They're still going to score a lot of points. So thoughts there?
Yeah, the low end tight end 1 range is where I think he's going to settle in with the rankings on a week to week basis. Yeah, what he really has going for him is that Dak Prescott is playing maybe better than he's ever played in his career. And the Cowboys, for all the issues that they still have, I think, comfortably a top 8 offense and probably like a top 5 offense. And they do pass the ball a lot. So this is an offense that can support 3 pass catchers. Ferguson as that number 3 guy. He has a decent floor. He just no longer has that ceiling. So I think low range tight end 1 is where he settles in.
Yeah, love it. And man, Pickens is just such a menace in the end zone and in the green zone inside the 10. Like he gets so many of those looks that actually what's funny is Jake Ferguson, is scoring the touchdowns this year, but he's not getting as many of those looks, down the seam. And maybe that's a good thing. Like he's almost been killed multiple times on those plays over his career. Big thing here, guys, utilization score fell from an 88 to 67. So like Freedman said, low end tight end 1 the rest of the way for Jake Ferguson. If someone in your league is still a believer in his fantasy points per game for the season and they think he's worth more than that, I would move him. All right, Bears, we're going to come back to them here. So why we didn't go super deep on all these other players. You kind of started to tease it though earlier, Freedman. Man, they got a massive rotation going on over here. Over the last 2 games, they're using more 2 tight end sets. They're rotating their wide receivers. Luther Burden is part of that. Romeo Dunze over these last 2 games, man, an 81% route participation. DJ Moore down to a 74%. Burden sitting at a 55%. He's on the rise. He had that 61% in week 11. Zacchaeus is the wide receiver 4. But the other thing here is 36% of the time they're using 12 personnel, guys, which is whenever you have 2 tight ends out on the field. So Loveland, 57% of the routes over that period. Komet, 56% of the routes over that period. So any thoughts here on this actually being a long-term concern, or do you see this as being one of those things, we'll check back in 2 weeks. This could just be a speed bump.
I mean, eventually it settles out, but by eventually, I mean, like in the upcoming seasons when like Cole Kmet isn't on the team and DJ Moore isn't on the team, right? But like for the rest of this year, I think what we have now, this rotation is pretty much, I don't say it's in stone. It can always, move based on performance of some of these guys. But I think if things just sort of stay steady, this is what we see where we have 4 wide receivers and 2 tight ends really competing for 4 spots on the field. And that just waters the potential down for all of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the one, that is the most concerning, for me that's the most surprising, I guess, if you will, is the Odunze one. Right. And so I'm just going to put the utilization report up on the screen for you guys. We were looking at the season view. You can find all of this over at fantasylife.com. Just use the code Freedman to get 20% off, and you can see cool stuff like this. Freedman was going to say this anyway, guys, so I just beat him to the punch on it. But if you look at this like full, season here, weeks 1 through 11 for the Bears, we had a 91% route participation rate here for Odunze. And then, if I just kind of take it down here to these last 2 games, this is where you see it, Freedman, now dropping down to an 81%. His utilization score is still sitting at a 70, which is the same as what we have for the season, mainly because he's been able to keep the targets like in a really good range. He's also been able to keep, his air yards. This is a big driver. His air yards and catchable air yards, 149 yards. What I will say, with Odunze, year 2 player, really high round draft pick. He's the one. If one of these guys snap back to like a 90% route participation,
yes,
I feel like it's probably him.
Yes.
The other thing I'll say on him is, man, they love him against man coverage. He has a 30% target share versus man coverage. They have a great man coverage matchup this week. So I think Odunze is probably smashing this weekend. I'll probably be putting out a prop bet on him on either Saturday or Sunday morning. But he's the guy I'm the least concerned about, but I'm still concerned. I'm still concerned because the other thing is you talked about like inflection points in the season that can like also lead us to think, okay, maybe they've reevaluated. This team, since their bye week, man, in week 5, drop back rate over expected, guys, which is just a number that looks at the score of the game, the situation that the team is in, and how often they're dropping back to pass versus the league, what the league has done in those same situations over the last 5 years of data, minus 4%. So they've turned from being a pass first team early in the year to now saying, no, we want to be a team that runs the ball, very similar to the way the Lions operate. And not only are they rotating all these other positions, that they're rotating their running backs more. DeAndre Swift's still the lead, but Kyle Monangai is playing, almost more of a 1B role at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. They're running the ball. They're rotating their players. I don't know if this changes at any point this season, but I do agree, Rome Odunze, if there is one who reascends, it is Odunze.
So would you, I guess if I had to put a pin in it, I'm buying Burton because right now he's on the waiver wire. And so it doesn't cost me anything. Yeah. DJ Moore, I don't know what you're doing with him. You might be cutting him or you're just holding him and hoping. Rome Odunze, though. Would you be a seller on Rome Odunze, or do you think he's just more of a hold?
I'm not selling. I think he's a hold or a buy.
Okay. All right. Like it. All right, here we go. Let's go to some team level trends here, guys. All right. I know some of those things we just talked about were team level, but we really got into the specifics of the players on them. We may hit on some player takes here, but just some things to be aware of. Number one, so these are the deltas between percentage of drives that end in a touchdown and the percentage of drives that make it to a red zone for a team. This is something I like to look at, Freedman, because we're always looking at potential ways like positive or negative regression could happen, right? And so if you get to the red zone a lot and you're having to kick field goals, it could always have just been variance, or you might actually get improved. You might have had injuries. There's so many things that go on in an NFL season, guys, but the Cardinals rank number 1, 14% difference in their touchdown drive rate versus their red zone drive rate. Any thoughts here on the Cardinals? And Freedman, if you think that Jacoby Brissett remains the quarterback for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't see how Jacoby Brissett is not the quarterback for the rest of the year.
I don't either.
I mean, unless he gets injured or just absolutely falls off the cliff, but he has at least 250 yards passing in every game this year that he started.
314 per game is his average.
I know. Like, amazingly, like, he is elevating the offense. And it makes me think back to, like, Jacoby Brissett is exactly the wrong kind of backup quarterback that a starter wants if that starter is just mediocre. Like Kyler Murray this year, like Deshaun Watson in his first year with the Browns, where it was like, oh man, Jacoby Brissett's actually like looking better than Deshaun Watson. Like we would not have anticipated this. And like, that was a sign of bad things to come for Watson. But like Jacoby Brissett has just been like a competent, like he in no way should a team enter the season thinking we want this guy as our starter. And I hope the Cardinals don't like fall into that pit, but he's been like a highly competent number 2 quarterback for like the past 10 years. So, and he's got a ton of starting experience. So yeah, the Cardinals are really intriguing to me, and Brissett is just absolutely slinging it. Like he's playing like he has nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Like, and he really doesn't have a starting job to lose at this point. He's just playing like, hey, I'm putting everything out there and hoping that this extends my NFL career another half decade.
So meat on the bone here with the Cardinals. Just one last question here for you, Freeman, because people, we want, I feel like, what we always want to do is turn something that's happening in now to, it has to be this long-term forecast. And you did a good job with it just then, which is you hope the Cardinals don't fall into that trap. But just talk about hot streaks real quick, like, and your thoughts on them, because like, I'll tell you, like doing this job for as long as we have and studying the data as long as we have, like, man, they happen. And Jacoby Brissett is on one, and we really don't know when it's going to end, guys. You could say you think it's this, it might not end this season. There's a chance it doesn't end. We've seen Joe Flacco do these things. We've seen other veteran backup quarterbacks come in, going way back, guys. Steve Berline, I remember at the end of a year for the Carolina Panthers. Like there are multiple examples of these, and then they're back to backup status, right? And some team may think they're a starter, but just talk for a second about hot streaks. And if you have different opinions on hot streaks at different positions, you also feel free, to talk about that. But I think quarterback is a position where, man, players can just get in a zone.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I would think of like Dak Prescott and what he was doing a couple of years ago to where it's like that was the purest version of Dak Prescott. And it seems like once a guy enters that zone, it's impossible to say when he's going to leave that. So I agree with you, but I will say, I think that doesn't carry over year to year.
What's funny is, I mean, the data shows that too. And the utilization data shows that at all the other positions. I do think the place you can get on the hot streak the most easily, not that it's easy, it's hard, but it is quarterback, because you're in the most control of it. You're the quarterback. Yes. I mean, and here's the other thing I'll say about Jacoby Brissett, guys. I've gone back and I've watched most of the film. I've watched 4 of these games because I wanted to watch Marvin Harrison and Michael Wilson. So I was like, I'm just going to watch Jacoby Brissett. Freeman, like, he's playing really good. Like, I mean, I'm talking pressure coming in his face, stepping into the pocket, and not just dropping a dump off pass like a lot of quarterbacks will. I'm talking throwing a 30-yard dart over the top of a defender, still somehow seeing. So he's absolutely in his zone. All right. Yeah. We don't have to talk a lot about this one, guys, but it's the Chiefs, a 13% delta between their touchdown drive ratio and their zone drive ratio. They're already one of the top 2 offenses in getting to the red zone, one of the top 4 offenses in scoring. But there's even more meat on the bone here, guys. Like they could potentially get on a heater where they're just scoring more points. You guys know who the star players are on the Chiefs. We don't need to tell you. But here's another interesting one for even the Panthers. Panthers sitting at a 12% here, delta between their touchdown drive ratio and their red zone drives. Any thoughts here on the Panthers and their outlook for the rest of the year, just the way their offense is running? Anything you want to mention on any of these players?
I mean, except nothing really. Like, you have to be a little still, to borrow a word from our friend Thor Nystrom, you have to be a little trepidatious about what this offense might look like because Bryce Young is the quarterback. But still, I'm pretty enthusiastic about what we've seen out of Tetaroa, McMillan, and running back Rico Dowdle. Like, those would be the 2 guys to where I think, like, if we see this delta shrink, it's because those guys are getting a lot of production in the green zone and turning opportunities into touchdowns. I'm really enthusiastic about those 2 guys.
Yeah. And I mean, really, you just hit on the key thing. And I've talked about it a couple of weeks now in the utilization report. And if you guys want to check it out for free over at fantasylife.com, you can. And at the end, so I walk through all the biggest takeaways for the week, and then I go through a section called utilization bites. And this year I've added a team trends section for it. And so a lot of the things Freedman talks about coming off of bye weeks, what do teams look like, quarterback change, play caller change. I look at all the trends, at the team level. And if you look at, what the Panthers have done beyond, just what we just talked about here, it's their dropback rate over expected. Like, they have really turned into a run first team over the second half of this season. They were balanced right out of the gate, but really since Rico Dowdle got onto his hot streak, they've decided that they want the identity of their team to be running the football. So obviously, the big takeaway there is I'm still on Rico Dowdle. I know some people, and even Ian's a little worried about the efficiency stuff. Like, what if he doesn't continue, having these big efficiency games? And maybe something happens there. Like, they like Chuba Hubbard. They pay Chuba Hubbard money. But guys, efficiency is so fluky. Like, it's just one of the number one things you just don't need to get washed up in. To be honest, like, it's good. It's good context to know. We know Jahmyr Gibbs averages 5 yards per carry. He's an outlier freak that can do that like all the time. Most backs are just going to come back down to the league average or a little below or a little above, and it's just going to swing back and forth week to week. So don't get washed away in running back efficiency would be my biggest thing. When you watch Rico Dowdle, he still looks really good, and Chuba Hubbard does not look very good right now. So last 2 here, Packers we already talked about, but 11% delta, and then the Jaguars on 11% delta. Either one of those teams, anything you want to talk about here? The Packers are interesting to me, Freeman, because like they started off hot, have played down to competition, but will also play up to competition at times. Just general thoughts on them. Like, I still think they're a good team. I think their defense is underperforming. Their secondary is playing better over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Offense underperforming a little bit, but it's still good. Like, they're balanced. They can. Losing Tucker Kraft really hurt. That was their key playmaker. So thoughts on the Packers the rest of the way?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. They're a good team. Their defense and offense seem to underperform at key times. And as great as I think Matt LaFleur is as the coordinator, the play caller within that offense, I still think the situational decision making at times can be a little bit lacking.
Yeah, he also has that weird cut in the hair. So it's almost like, I don't know if the hairline, like, I like his hair. I think his hair looks great, but like some people force the barber cut in the hair. Like it's actually like like someone took a razor and went down the line, and it's like above his part. It's above his natural part. So there's like this other part hanging out. I'm like, come on, man, like take the cut a little higher. Like my wife would tell you that. She's a stylist. All right. Drop back rate over expected trends, guys. Let's hit a few of these real quick. We just talked about the Cardinals, man. With Jacoby Brissett under center, which is a 5-game sample at this point, 3% drop back rate over expected. So that would be one of the top 6 over that span. Freedman, not like they're at a 7% or 8%, but still leaning into the pass. Then if we look at the Vikings, in the last 3 games with JJ McCarthy back, they actually have a 4% drop back rate over expected. So McCarthy not delivering, McCarthy not playing well, but the play caller at least showing a willingness, and Kevin O'Connell to throw the ball. Early in their year, if you remember back in those 2 first games with JJ McCarthy, it was like a run first team all the way. Yeah. Does this give you any confidence at all that maybe Justin Jefferson, these guys can get back on track, or do you just really feel like it's a lost cause?
No, I have no confidence in this offense whatsoever. And
the wet blanket is here.
I should stop talking about it now because I don't want to spend the next 5 minutes of the show talking about how bad this Vikings offense is.
Lions, last 2 games with Dan Campbell calling plays. Very small sample, but a 6% drop back rate over expected. Also, we've got the best role of the season for Jameson Williams. Do you see those as being inflection points that you're willing to buy into? Or just probably too small of a sample now? Or maybe it's just because Sam Laporta's out and that's helping J-Mo. Any thoughts there?
No, this is real. I see this as being very real. And, looking at the wide receiver situation for week 12, I think Jameson Williams is in an awesome spot. The Lions are number 1 in implied team total for the week. They are at home. They're in the dome where Jared Goff historically has absolutely dominated. And then to your point, what we have seen out of Jameson Williams recently. And I think the fact that Sam Laporta is out with the back injury also just creates all the more room for Jameson Williams within that offense. And then looking at their matchup going against the Giants this week, Giants are number 4 in largest fantasy boost allowed to wide receivers. You can see that in our DVP tool at Fantasy Life. And then potential some secondary starters could be out for the Giants as well. So I know we're kind of thinking longer term trend, rest of the season trend, but even this week, man, I love Jameson Williams.
Giants also run the number 1 amount of man coverage, guys. They and they haven't changed from that, even despite all the injuries. Now maybe they finally will. They've got a head coaching change, but that means one-on-one matchups with J-Mo pulling away from defenders. I agree with you. This is a smash matchup for J-Mo. And also, guys, just the schedule really looks good. You get the Packers the next week, which is a negative fantasy boost situation based on the DVP tool that Freedman mentioned, and they've been playing better lately. But then you get the Cowboys, who might be better. They look better, but it was the Raiders. Like, we've got one data point with Quinnen Williams, Damarion Overshown also back into the fold. The Cowboys are getting healthier on defense. Then you get the Rams. That's a slightly positive matchup at this point. And then you get a positive matchup against the Steelers, who also like to run a lot of man coverage, before ending the fantasy season in week 17 against the Vikings, who have actually been one of the toughest matchups for wide receivers. But overall, good schedule the rest of the way for J-Mo, for some of you guys facing trade deadlines this weekend.
Yeah, one quick thing to add in. All of these games from here on out, from now to week 17, are indoors in a dome. Perfect situation for the passing offense.
Great call. Okay, real quick, Saints minus 10% drop back rate over expected in 2 games with Shuck. I don't know how much we can really do with that, Freedman. Just something we're kind of keeping an eye on. And then just real quick, guys, pace. Play clock remaining when the game is within 3 points. The Cowboys snap the ball on average with 11.4 seconds remaining on the play clock. That is absolutely astronomical. So if you love your Cowboys players, you're going to continue loving your Cowboys players. You have a tough matchup with the Eagles this week. I think we still have, with 4 teams on bye, I think all of our rankers still have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens inside the 12 against a tough matchup. Like this is one of those guys is probably not hitting the top 12 this week. But what it tells you guys is like how strongly all of us feel about the Cowboys offense, even though we just saw the Eagles completely punch the Lions right in the face. And Jared Goff really struggled against them. The Rams are second at 9.9. And here's just over the last 5 games, guys. 13.5 seconds remaining for the Cowboys. The Bengals with Joe Flacco. And now you could have Joe Burrow back, 10.7. The Saints at 10.1. So even though they're running the ball a lot, they're still running a lot of plays. And the Ravens with Lamar Jackson back are running a much faster offense again, even though they are also not throwing the ball very much. They're lining up in heavy sets and handing off the ball to King Henry. For the most part, Lamar still looking pretty banged up. So we'll see if he gets back to form in the run game. So let's talk about a few league level trends here, Freedman. Number 1, league passing yards and offensive points by month from 2014 to 2024. In September, passing yards per game, 237 with 21.7 fantasy points per game. October, 236 yards, so almost the same as September, but kind of peak form. It kind of makes sense. Like offenses get into their groove. Weather hasn't changed yet. 21.9, not fantasy points, 21.9 offensive points per game. Then you get to November, guys. Things start to drop off down to 229 yards passing per game. Scoring drops to 21.6 per game. December down to 224. Weather gets colder, injuries are mounting, 21.4 points per game. You've done a lot of research on this kind of stuff, Freedman, because you do a lot with the betting model. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, so I think you touched on 2 things, the injuries and the weather. So much of this is driven by the weather games, the games that are outdoors. And so just a couple of thoughts here on how to evaluate this. So the big things are wind and temperature, wind being the biggest one of those. And, I talked about this on a previous edition of the show. People should check that out.
You should definitely go back and check it out. It's one of the most actionable shows we've done. There's so much in there. If you guys want to be better bettors, Freedman helps you. Carry on, Freedman. Sorry.
Yeah. So with the wind, 15 miles per hour has been the point that a lot of people have talked about as the starting point where wind impacts, but it's really 10 miles per hour. So 10 to 14 miles per hour, the under has just dominated over the past, 20, 25 years. 15 to 24 miles per hour. And here's why I'm saying this. A lot of people will look at the totals in the betting market and use that for their projections, use that to help inform their rankings. And so you want to be sure you don't double count, right? And so 10 to 14 miles per hour has been a point where the market hasn't adjusted enough to the impact of wind. 15 to 24 miles per hour, the market has adjusted pretty much as it should, maybe a little bit of an over adjustment, but basically the market has been efficient in that range. And then 25 miles per hour or more, that is like the type of environment that just destroys the passing game and potentially the kicking game as well. So the under, we haven't seen many games like that, just a 17 game sample, but the under is 14-3 in that sample. And the under has hit, and think about how low the totals are in that situation. And even as low as those totals are, the under has hit by 10.3 points per game in that sample. So like the win situation of 25 miles per hour or more, you just want to take your hands off of any type of player in that game, except maybe a running back.
Yeah.
And then the temperatures, 60 degrees or more, great temperature. The market tends to be efficient there. 33 to 59 degrees, just a little bit towards the under. And then 30 to 32 degrees is a massive, I know it's only a small range, but a massive hit to the under. 66, 45, and 3 has been the record in that range. And then 15 to 29 degrees, the market has over adjusted to where the over has actually been the sharp side. So people don't adjust enough to that 30 to 32 degrees, and they adjust too much when it's 15 to 29 degrees, and then 14 degrees and under, the market is efficient. So those are kind of the ways of thinking about the weather impacts that we will see in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and if you guys think about it from a coaching perspective, Chris Allen has also done some great research on this. When these winds and these temperatures reach certain areas, they change the way they're calling the game. You
Yes.
know, they're going to be more likely to run the ball. It does depend on their quarterback. There's always context that's in play on these things, guys. But also, like, the passing game itself has to change if the winds are high and temps are cold, right? Things get condensed. There's going to be lower ADOT throw, average depth of target throws. Not going to be pushing the ball down the field as much just because the wind can do so much more damage than, you know, to those passes that are going deeper. Just ups the chances for interceptions and completions, all those sort of things. So, big impacts there. And while it doesn't sound like a ton, man, when you start off the year at 237 passing yards per game and you end at 224, like, it's notable. I mean, across an entire league. Like, I mean, it's obviously having an impact, and that's 10 years of data. And I don't have to worry about it as much. You know why, guys? Because the projection model at Fantasy Life, we have plugged into Freedman's betting model, and we're using Freedman's betting NFL game betting model. You can go check it out over on the site. You can find his 5-star and 4-star bets. He has been crushing. He nearly became a billionaire last week, but he wrote it too long with the Raiders. He could have had your biggest week in 5 years, Freedman, and you let it all ride on the Raiders.
I hate myself, especially as a Cowboys fan. I mean, I hate myself anyway, but I hate myself as a Cowboys fan anyway. But then I hate myself as a betting person who roots for the Cowboys and was betting against the Cowboys on Monday Night Football by betting on the Raiders. Unreal stuff. Unreal.
Still, the model had a really good week. So you guys make sure you go check it out. If people were to do one thing, Freeman, when they go to it, and here, I should probably just real quick, we got a few minutes here. I should probably show people for the folks that are watching on YouTube, for those that are not, you know, you just go to Fantasy Life. Okay. And here we go. Let's get this over here onto the screen. You go to fantasylife.com. You come up here to betting. You go to game model. And then you're going to see all of Freedman's data. If you could tell people to do one thing, Freedman, is it basically just to find these 5-star bets? So you've got stuff here on the spread, the money line, and the total.
Yeah, I would say just sort by edge and look at the stuff at the top. And that doesn't mean it's always like an automatic bet. I obviously encourage everyone to do their own research, but because I know what goes into the model and I can always look into it and identify, oh, you know, this specific thing is why we're showing an edge on this team right here. I have high confidence in what is shown here with the stars. So I would say a lot of the 4 or 5-star bets, I always look into them, but I always basically just automatically bet the 4 and 5-star bets.
Sneak peek, guys. Tampa Bay and the Rams. If you're watching on YouTube, bonus for you. Like the video if you like the video, as Ian likes to say. You got 3 5-star bets here on the spread side. You got Tampa at the Rams, and you've got the edge here to the Rams, Freedman, as a 5-star bet. For everybody listening on the podcast, you know, you got to go check out fantasylife.com, and you can see the rest of these. And you too could almost be a billionaire like Freedman and then hate yourself. All right. Kickoff rule change. That's our number 10 topic here, Freedman. Let's talk about what the impacts have looked like this year. You've got some really good data to share with people.
Yeah. So, you know, there have been various rule changes on kickoffs over the past few years. And so, you know, the rule change this year made it likelier that teams would be starting further down the field. And that has come to pass. And so that has impacted what we see in the passing game and the running game in terms of the number of attempts. So over the previous 3 years, teams had 33.2 passing attempts, 21.5 completions, 234.7 yards, and 0.77 interceptions. And then this year, all of those numbers have dropped down just a little bit. 32.4 pass attempts, 21.1 completions, 229.8 yards, and then 0.7 interceptions. But touchdowns are actually up. You know, previous 3 years, 1.43 passing touchdowns per game on the team level. This year, 1.6. That is a pretty big increase.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because if you think about expected points added, and you think about if you're first down, you know, you're first and 10, what's the average starting yard line? Do we know?
I don't have that.
It's closer though. It's closer to the end zone. And so, guys, if you've heard of EPA and you're like, what is EPA? It's expected points added. And so the way that you look at that is like for every yard marker on the field, down and distance, all the other situations. And basic thing that you need to know is the closer you get to your own end zone, the probability of you scoring goes up. So it makes complete sense that we would actually see more touchdowns here because of starting field position.
Yeah, and similar thing with the rushing. Rushing is down a little bit, not much, just a little bit. 27 carries down to 26.4, 118 yards down to 116, but the number of rushing touchdowns per game has stayed exactly the same, zero 0.9. And so the takeaways for this, and it's obvious, Dwayne talked about it. What matters for scoring is not yards or opportunities, but starting position and proximity to the end zone. And I think what this means is that there are some intriguing opportunities in the betting market, because a lot of models will be driven by the number of yards that a player is projected to have, and that gets correlated to touchdowns. And so that means in some of the inversely correlated,
we need to recalibrate
game, a player who gets a ton of work inside the 5-yard line, taking him to score an anytime touchdown, and then betting the under on his scrimmage yardage, like Christian McCaffrey, under on the scrimmage yardage, over on the touchdowns, because those two things are correlated, but not as strongly correlated as some of the projection models might think. So I think there's an opportunity there.
Hey, Freeman, just real quick, you cut out for 1 second on the single player bet there. Like, so I caught the end of it with CMC, but what was the main takeaway that people should do?
Sure. On the single game parlays, there's the opportunity to bet the under on his scrimmage yardage, but to bet him to score an touchdown.
And you get those inverse correlation.
Those are inversely correlated, but they're not as strongly correlated as a lot of projection models would think.
Awesome. Great takeaway. All right, guys, we hope that you enjoyed the show today. Freeman, what you got going on? What do people need to go check out?
So, you showed them the betting model at Fantasy Life, or the projection game model. A lot of work still goes into that. We're still kind of tweaking, as I think of it a little bit like Dr. Nick Giffen, who's at Action Network, who does a lot of NASCAR stuff. I used to do a NASCAR show with him, and he would talk about how like there's always tweaking that these driving teams are doing under the hood, like each race, like they're making adjustments. And so similar like that, we're still like making tweaks on the projection model, trying to sharpen it every week. So check out the projection model we have. And then I have my Freeman's Favorites articles where I look at it's an early look in the week at how I'm probably going to be ranking quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And then of course, doing some guillotine league stuff on the Chopped podcast, which is a lot of fun. So check all that out.
Yeah, go check it all out, guys. If you're not following Freeman yet over on Twitter, what are you doing? At Matt F. the Oracle. And we will see you again next week. I put data and week together. It's a new word, so we will talk data to you again next week, guys. Have a good weekend.